I'm speaking with the president of the AVN, Australian Vaccination Network, Meryl Dorey, today. G'day, Meryl.
Hi there.
Thanks so much for your time today. And first up, I'd like you to tell us about the AVN, being the Australian Vaccination Network, how you became involved with the organisation and as well what it stands for.
Okay, well, basically, I became involved with this. I started the organization in 1994. I have a son who's vaccine injured. Prior to that, I never questioned vaccination. I never even knew that a vaccine can cause problems. I hadn't been told any information about vaccination at all, except what the schedule was and when my child was supposed to get his vaccines, which he's 23 years old now. He would have had 18 vaccines by the time he started school, where now a child in Australia gets close to 50 vaccines in the same time frame. I became interested in the issue because of my own son's reaction, and I started the organization because I felt that it wasn't right that I hadn't been given any information to make this decision. It's an important choice, what we do with our children's health, and it's one that needs to be made with proper and complete medical information, and I wasn't given access to that. So the reason that the AVN exists is to provide information to balance the very one-sided information that most parents will get from their doctors or their council clinics. So we provide a balance. We don't give the entire story. The information on the pros of vaccination is available everywhere. Finding information on the other side is the difficulty.
You mentioned earlier about your son. You said he was vaccine injured. How can you prove this?
Well, as far as proving it goes, I have no proof. It's almost impossible to prove a vaccine reaction because most people in the medical community believe that vaccines don't cause serious side effects. So even when they see it happening in front of them, they say it's coincidental or that the child had a virus or bacteria. I'm lucky because my doctor, when I told him what happened, he said, oh, that may have been the whooping cough vaccine. Let's leave that out of his next shot. And that was when I started to research because, as I said, no idea that vaccines could cause serious reactions. And I continued to vaccinate without the whooping cough vaccine until he was 18 months old, and then he had another serious reaction to his measles, mumps, rubella vaccine and ended up in hospital. And at that point, they denied that there was any connection between the vaccination and the reaction. As part of the Australian Vaccination Network, we have an adverse reactions database which had over 1,000 serious reactions reported to us that have never been reported by the doctors. And when someone reports to us, we report that reaction to the government. And I constantly the same exact reactions that my son had over and over and over again. And it becomes serious that there are reactions that are occurring to vaccination which are not being acknowledged by the medical community. The Australian government acknowledges through ADRAC, the Adverse Drug Reactions Advisory Committee, that only about 1% of all serious reactions to drugs and vaccines are actually reported.
1%?
That's right. That was in a conversation I went to Canberra to lobby to allow these to report adverse reactions because the government wouldn't allow us to do that for almost 10 years. And we finally got permission to. And I spoke with John McEwen, who was the doctor in charge of the Adverse Drug Reactions Advisory Committee at that point, and he admitted that only about 1% of reactions are reported. So therefore, when we're told that something is perfectly safe, we're basing that on information that's 99% incorrect. And those aren't great odds. I think that we need better information. We need better tracking of adverse reactions when it comes to our children's health. And we can't really believe the assurances that the medical community are giving us because it's not based on information. It's more based on wishful thinking.
Well, if it's agreed that only 1% of cases are reported, why is this not dealt with? Why aren't governments and medical authorities saying, well, hang on a tick, this just isn't good enough. We should be up there around 99% are reported. This is the children's health we're dealing with.
We definitely should be. One of the things, I said I went to Canberra to lobby. Larry was the Minister for Health at that time, and one of the things that the AVN was trying to accomplish was to make it mandatory for all health professionals to report adverse reactions when they occur. They paid an awful lot of money through the general practice immunization incentive to push vaccines, but they were not being penalized in any way if they didn't report reactions when they occurred. And what Larry Anthony said, every country, even countries with mandatory reaction reporting, only gets about 1% of reports given into the government. So therefore, we're not doing any worse than anyone else, so it's fine. That's not a good enough attitude, is it? These are children's health. The lives of our precious children we're talking about. And we need to make sure that the information that we're using to say whether vaccines are safe and it is the best possible information. And unfortunately in Australia we don't have that.
Meryl, I want to deal with some of the criticisms of you. Hilariously ignorant, has many factual errors, irrational anti-vax beliefs, wacky crackpot standards, hilarious anti-vaccine idiocy, and that it has been proven by the Healthcare Complaints Commission that you have supplied false, misleading and biased information. How do you respond to these types of criticisms, and where do they come from? Are any of them true?
I don't believe that any of them are true. They are coming from two organizations in Australia. One of them is called the Australian Skeptics, and that's a misnomer to call themselves because they're skeptical about nothing that is mainstream and completely skeptical about anything that's considered alternative or complementary health. As a matter of fact, they're trying very hard to stop access to any form of complementary health care. But they started a group 3 years ago called Stop the AVN, and just like their name is, they are out to shut the Australian Nation Network down. They don't believe that anyone has a right to not vaccinate, and they don't believe that anyone has a right to get information on the downside or the risks of vaccination. And I take them from where it comes, which is from a group of people who have a vested interest in making sure that vaccination is the done thing. There was Dr. Brian Martin, who is at the University of Wollongong, wrote a paper called Debating Vaccination, all about these attacks against me personally and against the Australian Vaccination Network. And these attacks have included death threats. They've included incredibly violent pornography being forwarded to myself and to members of our organization. They've included threats to people who are advertising with us, to the point where I stopped taking advertising because I refused to put anyone who supported the AVN into that position. Every time that I have a seminar, they contact the venue and try to get the venue to cancel. So every time I book a seminar, I have to let the venue know up front, you will be receiving these letters. I can send them copies of them. You'll be getting letters like this. If you feel that you're going to cancel this seminar, please let me know. At this point, do not cancel after we've booked. So I'm very upfront with everyone about it. These sorts of activities should be illegal because they are threatening, intimidating, and bullying. And that's why Brian Martin, who's the head of Whistleblowers Australia, wrote this article about these attacks, and he's written several other articles since then. As Healthcare Complaints Commission goes, Stop the AVN and the Australian Skeptics know perfectly well that we fought against the Healthcare Complaints Commission for an entire year, and we won our case in February. The decision that the Healthcare Complaints Commission made to investigate us and also warning against us were thrown out by the Supreme Court of New South Wales. And yet these people still continue to say that we were found to be deceptive and misleading. Well, no, the Supreme Court said that the Healthcare Complaints Commission acted outside of its jurisdiction and did not do a proper investigation and had no jurisdiction to actually issue a warning against us. Because it suits their agenda, they continue to discuss this as if it's still the case.